Hi everyone, it's Melissa, and today I am doing the nonfiction on Booktube tag because Nonfiction November is just right around the corner. Later this week I'm going to be posting my Nonfiction November TBR, but because it's Tuesday, I thought I would do the tag. So this tag was originally put together by Olive from a Book Olive, who is also the host of Nonfiction November. So I will link her original video in the description. So the first question is, how much nonfiction do you read? I would say it probably depends on the month or the year, really, because my reading has ebbed and flowed over the years. But on the whole, about, I would say 25% or so of my reading is nonfiction. And this year I think I've read about between 20 and 25 nonfiction books as of the end of October. So yeah. Number 2 is, what kind of nonfiction videos do you make or do you want to make on Booktube? So right now, I review nonfiction during my just normal monthly wrap-ups. In the future, I would like to do a few more things specifically for nonfiction. So I'd like to put together some recommendations lists for nonfiction in general, and maybe kind of like my favorite from different genres, I guess, of nonfiction. So like favorite memoirs and science nonfiction, etc. And I think I would like to also do maybe some like fiction nonfiction pairings. I think that might be fun. Number 3 is, what's your favorite subgenre of nonfiction? So I think my favorite is science nonfiction, especially nature. And I think a close second being memoir. I really like kind of that perspective from people who have lived very different lives from me. I also really like nonfiction about social issues and social justice. I especially like books about feminism. Number 4 is, do you have a favorite nonfiction book? That's really hard because I've read a lot of really great nonfiction, but I'm going to go with Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I've only read this earlier this year, but I can tell that this is going to be a favorite for a long time. I think it'll be a long while before I read anything that lives up to that book, for me at least. Braiding Sweetgrass is a book about our relationship with nature, reciprocity with nature, the idea of nature and like the relationship between people and nature as like a gift instead of commodity or resources. And the author uses a lot of different perspectives. This perspective of a scientist, because she is a botanist, the perspective of an Indigenous person, as she is also Indigenous, and just her own personal anecdote mixed in with this. So it's an all-around great book about nature and our relationship with nature. Number 5 is, what do you think keeps people from wanting to read more nonfiction? I think people who don't read nonfiction think that all nonfiction is very dry. I think that they think that all nonfiction is academic, and that's definitely not the case. I think people who don't read nonfiction see nonfiction as one big genre, and maybe don't know about all of the different subgenres of nonfiction. If you have an interest, there is probably a nonfiction book or maybe even a genre of nonfiction that tailors to that interest. Number 6 is, why do you like nonfiction? I love learning new things, but I also like reading about things I know about. So I like learning something new, but I also like deepening my understanding or my knowledge of topics that I already have some knowledge in. So just learning in general, I think, is the biggest reason that I read nonfiction. But also I find it's just a way to break up other reading. Like, I think reading fiction all the time would be just as boring as reading nonfiction all the time. So it's just a way to break up my reading in different ways, I guess, as well. Number 7 is, what's a nonfiction book you read because of Booktube? So one book I read because I saw it on Olive's channel, and I'll try to find the video where she talks specifically about this book and link it below. But that's the Feather Thief by, I'm gonna have to find the author's name, by Kirk Wallace Johnson. So this is a book about a museum heist at the Natural History Museum in the UK, and somebody stole absolutely irreplaceable specimens of like different birds and feathers that were collected like by contemporaries of Darwin, and basically was selling them on the black market for fly ties for like salmon fishing. It's the most bizarre true story you've ever heard. And it was really gripping. I think I gave it like 4 stars or something. Really, really enjoyable. Question 8 is, what's the best nonfiction book you've read lately? Okay, I might have to like go to my Goodreads and see. Okay, so I think within the last couple months, my favorite nonfiction that I've read has been As You Wish, Inconceivable Tales from the Making of the Princess Bride. And this is a memoir of the making of the Princess Bride by Cary, Elwes. I don't think this book would necessarily appeal to everyone, as you kind of have to be a fan of the movie, I think, to enjoy this book. But if you enjoy the movie, I think that you would enjoy kind of like all the behind the scenes little snippets and anecdotes, and just like what it took to make the movie. And it was just an absolute joy to read. Also, I listened to it on audio, and Cary Elwes narrates it just beautifully. Like, his voice is delicious. I mean, like, who wouldn't want Wesley just like narrating a book to them? It was just wonderful. Number 9 is, what are some of your nonfiction reading goals? I'd like to read more nonfiction books that examine intersectionality, and like for an example, like I really want to read Hood Feminism by Mikki Kendall. I'll make sure that I list all the books below to make sure I have the authors' names right. But I'd like to read that book to kind of maybe educate myself on how my brand of feminism is exclusive or maybe even harmful to other women. And I would like to read other books that kind of examine issues that I'm interested in, but through other lenses to make me aware of my own biases. I would like to get out of my own head when I'm reading about social issues. So I'm striving to read more nonfiction like that and kind of challenge myself in that way. Number 10 is, what's your advice for incorporating more nonfiction into your reading diet? I think if you don't read nonfiction and you kind of don't know where to start, I would say find something on a topic that you already hold an interest in. And I guarantee there is a nonfiction book out there about said thing. Even if it's very niche, there's probably a book about it. There are nonfiction books about nature and science and mathematics and different sports, and about people, and about people's very specific experiences. There are nonfiction books about food and dancing and movies and music and everything. Like, you can find a nonfiction book about whatever you are into. I would also start with like creative nonfiction, so something that threads a narrative throughout the story rather than something perhaps more academic, or not even academic, but something that's like very super heavy in stats, unless stats are really your thing. But I feel like if stats are really your thing, then you might already read nonfiction. But there are nonfiction like that that are very useful and can also be enjoyable to read. But if you're getting into nonfiction, I would go more, like steer clear of the more academic nonfiction and go towards a more like creative nonfiction. Creative nonfiction reads more like a story and is a good entry point if you're only really experienced in reading fiction. The bonus question is to give some recommendations of nonfiction booktube channels that you love. So if you haven't already heard of A Book Olive, I would start there, of course. So she is one of the hosts of Nonfiction November, and she reads a ton of nonfiction. I believe she reads more nonfiction than she reads fiction, so definitely check out her channel. Also, Natalie at Curious Reader reads a lot of nonfiction as well, and I believe Natalie is also one of the hosts for Nonfiction November this year. Justin, his channel name is Ghost Reader. He reads a good deal of nonfiction as well. And, oh, I've forgotten her name. Dancing Lawn is the channel's name. I will link her below. She talks about nonfiction on her channel, I think, fairly consistently as well. So those are the channels that I would recommend if you want to watch booktubers who talk about nonfiction. So that was the Nonfiction on Booktube tag. I hope everyone's doing really well. Thank you for watching, and pick up a nonfiction book in November. We'll chat soon. Take care.